I asked my mom to name an anime and she said Devilman, which is an awesome answer, but it's funny to me because I know the only context that she even knows what is a Devilman is because of a song I made 6 years ago called Everything is Devilman through my experimental rap project Trial of the Golden Witch. The point of the song was essentially to insert myself into a proposed lineage of devilmen and devil ladies, based on the about-to-be-sung incomparable influence of Go Nagai's classic 1972 shonen battle manga, Devilman. Let's take a look at the original to start with. In the early 1970s, the conventions of shonen battle manga were only just starting to be defined through the popularity of works like Cyborg 009 and Kamen Rider from artist Shotaro Ishinomori, for whom Devilman creator Go Nagai worked as an assistant at the start of his career. Nagai first rose to prominence through writing gag comedy manga with the raunchiest, most controversial premises that he could possibly think of. Whatever boundaries exist now in shonen manga with regards to what's allowed to be shown were defined by the Japanese PTA's war against the absolute filth that Nagai was getting published, and the influence that it would have on gag comedy going forward. Influential as Nagai's comedy work is, though, he is today mostly remembered for putting his mecha pilot in the cockpit for the first time in Mazinger Z, and helping to codify the concept of a fighting magical girl with cutie honey, and of course for the wealth of apocalyptic fiction inspired by his utterly demented take on action manga with Devilman. If you just take Devilman as the sum of its parts, a bulk of it hits pretty much the same as any other super edgy shonen battle manga, with a transforming hero taking on various dastardly monsters in epic combat encounters, not unlike what we'd get from later popular manga like Dragon Ball, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and especially Jujutsu Kaisen. But Devilman is so memorable more for the ways that it starts and ends than for the bulk of the story, and for the overall premise surrounding the action, which lends a sense of thematic grandiosity to what is an otherwise pretty normal shonen manga. Specifically, it's the way that the series borrowed heavily from Judeo-Christian mythology and especially the biblical apocalypse, and it follows through on the ideas of those to the most shockingly violent, insane, and depressing endings in action manga history. Suffice it to say that Devilman did its concept to such closure that it couldn't really be meaningfully sequelized or referenced without just doing the exact same thing again, which is exactly what Go Nagai has done in order to sequelize the manga directly and to create a sort of culture of recreating Devilman with slight differences and under slightly different names over and over again, because Go Nagai is a goddamn business genius. Just based on this video's demographics, it's most likely that you have never read the original Devilman manga, but are probably familiar with the story anyways thanks to the popular Science Saru adaptation from 2018, which captures the essential elements well enough that it makes the same points. My first exposure to an anime series obviously influenced by Devilman was probably The Soul Taker from 2001, directed by one of my favorites, Akiyuki Shinbo, before he became the lead creative voice at Studio Shaft. Tatsunoko Productions had a long history of making shows about transforming heroes, with the popular Gatchaman and Kashurn series having run contemporaneously with Devilman's heavily watered-down original anime adaptation. By the 1990s, they had started rebooting a lot of their classic shows for an older audience, with Tekkaman Blade, Kashurn, and Gatchaman reboots. Shinbo's first dark transformation of a classic Tatsunoko IP was Shin Hurricane Polymar, and it came with some clear runoff from that studio's involvement in having animated Gainax's seminal 1995 series Shinseiki Evangelion, considering they'd reuse imagery from that series in Generator Gall, as well as The Soul Taker, which took the time and place opportunity of existing in the year 2000 to be as weird as humanly possible. Evangelion and The Soul Taker, to me, bear the most unmistakable hallmark of Devilman's influence, which is the prevalent use of completely meaningless Christian iconography. Even though the world of Devilman is obviously inspired by Christian mythology, it has no interest whatsoever in presenting itself as Christian media. If anything, Go Nagai was absolutely gunning to create satanic panic, and he would have succeeded if any American company had actually been brave enough to import Devilman before the late 90s, when its global influence had already gotten too pervasive to really even track. Devilman borrows some names and ideas from the Bible, but ultimately it presents a version of hell with its own rules that obviously inspired the likes of the Demon Realm from Yu Yu Hakusho and Hell from Dragon Ball Z. There's a lot of imagery that's used to suggest that the apocalypse at the end of Devilman is supposed to be the very one predicted by the Christian Bible, but most of what actually transpires therein is dependent on Nagai's imagination, rather than referencing revelations directly. I could possibly believe that Go Nagai had actually read the Bible, or at least parts of it, and had been inspired to create Devilman, but it feels more like the application of the Japanese Shinto concept of an underworld onto a vague understanding of Christian ideas as overheard through the media grapevine. I almost could not believe that Anno Hideaki had read any part of the Bible when he created Evangelion. In fact, so little of the biblical stuff actually comes up in the script that I'm almost sure he just instructed the art team to incorporate as many crosses and references to angels as possible, while building mostly just a totally original mythos. The Soul Taker doesn't even go as far as Evangelion does in actually referencing anything Christian in its dialogue, and instead really just uses the imagery to create a neo-Gothic atmosphere which Shinbo is obsessed with. More so even than the fashionable use of Christian iconography, though, it's really the way that each of these shows portrays the hero losing control and going goblin mode on bad guys that feels the most in reference to the ruthlessness of Devilman when the demon Amon is in full control. I would actually believe that Anno only knew as much about Christianity as he learned from Devilman. Evangelion is also like Devilman in that it goes all the way on the apocalyptic imagery and ideas, with the film end of Evangelion almost resembling an attempt to one-up the ending of Devilman for its insanity. This wasn't the first series to visually draw from Devilman in creating scenes of mass death and carnage either, with Berserk's shocking Eclipse scene having been partly inspired by Devilman as well, and creating an even more traumatizing scene as the series had so much more time to flesh out its world and characters by volume 13 compared to Devilman's only 5 volumes. Just as powerfully referenced as its epic ending, though, is Devilman's relationship between its protagonist and his powers. Akira Fudo is a pretty average high school kid whose best friend gets him embroiled in either helping hell to boil over or keeping it from happening by taking the soul of hell's most powerful demon, Amon, into his body. Akira is such a good guy that sharing a body with him seems to affect Amon's morality to make him fight in defense of humanity. But also, since Amon's favorite thing is to kill other demons anyways, he gets to do that to the full ferocity of his ability when Akira turns him against other demons. I think the manga which has expanded on this concept the most obviously is Jujutsu Kaisen, in which the hero has a lot less control or a relationship with the demon inside of him, causing that demon to create nigh-apocalyptic events even while inside of his body. But by far the manga that most closely references and expands on the Devilman concept, though, is Chainsaw Man. When I had made a whole song about how many great series referenced Devilman, I never expected that a manga by a different name was going to basically just do the same thing but much better. But across 10 volumes in its original story and counting with its new one, Chainsaw Man is able to fill in all of the emotional gaps that Devilman was missing on its race to be the edgiest thing imaginable. You could say that Chainsaw Man is even edgier in its own way because it bothers to make you really care about its characters and sells its epic cinematic scope at the same level that Nagai does, but with even more inventiveness and emotional breadth. It's the most I've ever felt that an author set out to essentially do a Devilman, but also while breaking away from all the nostalgic imagery and the structure that stories with that name keep reusing, and instead to reimagine the whole concept in a way that leaves a lot more room for experimentation and intrigue in the storytelling. I know it's maybe not a fair comparison since I couldn't imagine how Chainsaw Man would exist without Devilman existing first, but suffice it to say that I do think it is the better version of Devilman than probably any of the many Devilmans that there are. Most of them are fine, by the way. Just Chainsaw Man is really good. Apocalypse Zero is like a Devilman set after the apocalypse from Devilman has already happened, and there's just one hero left trying to defend the scraps of humanity left over by a world that's just totally overrun with horrible demons. It's the only one that I actually think maybe pushed the shock value even past what Nagai had done. which I don't think is where sensibilities have really trended over the decades, which has led this to become even more obscure and kind of reviled. But we'll see if that tide ever changes on this manga in the future. I mentioned earlier that Devilman's influence is pervasive in a way that's difficult to really track. In the immediate wake of Devilman, Nagai began working with Ken Ishikawa on the Getter Robo series, which also reached a point of apocalyptic action and would also later be cited as a major influence on, for instance, the story of Gurren Lagann, whose creative team would also reference Devilman in small ways throughout the story of Kill La Kill. These are easily traceable influences because the creators wear their influences on their sleeves so much and are willing to talk about where they got their ideas from. But by the time we're talking about stuff that resembles Devilman from the 2000s, it's just as easy to imagine that those creators would have seen other stuff inspired by Devilman and maybe never even seen Devilman. Influence tends to happen instantaneously and in perpetuity until it is so taken for granted that the origin is less important than just the fact of the matter. Devilman isn't so old that stuff that's just like Devilman couldn't possibly have been just trying to do Devilman. But a time will come when it is very unlikely that Devilman itself would be your first exposure to a Devilman type story. Anyway, if you have a favorite incarnation of Devilman or Devilman type thing, or you think I've missed some important works that drew from a Devilman in this video because I'm always way too focused on anime, let me know about that in the comments, and always remember, anime forever.